the man who listened more than he spoke. Have you ever met someone who spoke so little, yet somehow changed everything around them? Someone whose silence was not empty, but full of meaning, someone whose greatest strength was not in their words, but in their ability to listen. This is the story of a man like that. A man who discovered that listening is more powerful than speaking, that by giving others the gift of attention, he could open doors that no speech could ever unlock. And perhaps, as you hear this story, you will start to wonder, do I listen enough? Or am I too busy waiting for my turn to speak? Stay with me until the end, because this story may forever change the way you connect with people. In a small town, tucked between hills and rivers, lived a man named Elias. He was not known for grand speeches, nor for telling endless stories. In fact, most people thought of him as a quiet stranger. He sat at the cafe each morning with his tea, never interrupting, never pushing his opinion. When conversations grew loud, he simply leaned back, folded his hands, and listened. At first, people misunderstood him. Some said, he must be shy, others whispered, maybe he has nothing to say. But they were wrong. Elias carried a secret strength. His silence was not weakness. It was wisdom. Because when others shouted to be heard, he listened. When others argued to win, he listened. And when others felt invisible, he listened. Slowly, without even trying, people began to notice something unusual. Whenever they spoke with Elias, they felt lighter. As if their burdens were understood. As if their voices finally mattered. One evening, a young man named Daniel walked into the cafe. His face was pale, his eyes heavy, and his spirit clearly broken. He sat at a corner table, head in his hands, while the others laughed, argued, and carried on with their usual noise. Nobody seemed to notice him, except Elias. Elias didn't rush over with advice. He didn't offer meaningless words like, "It will be fine," or "Cheer up." Instead, he quietly moved his chair, and sat beside Daniel. For minutes, Elias said nothing. He simply waited until Daniel finally whispered, "I can't do this anymore." Daniel spoke of his failures at work, of the debts that weighed on him, of the fear that he had let his family down. His voice cracked, his hands shook. And through it all, Elias did the one thing no one else had done. He listened. Not with impatience. Not with judgment. But with the kind of silence that said, "I hear you. I see you. You are not alone." Hours passed, and Daniel kept speaking. By the end, something in him had shifted. The burden was still there, but his heart felt lighter. For the first time in months, he had hope. And all of this happened, not because Elias had spoken many words, but because he had listened. Truly listened. Word began to spread in the town. People started coming to Elias, not for advice, but for a safe space to be heard. The old widow who felt forgotten sat with him and shared her memories. The young woman afraid to follow her dreams confessed her fears. The merchant worried about losing his shop unburdened his soul. And with each story, Elias offered no grand speeches. No complicated solutions. Just presence. Just listening. But something incredible began to happen. Because when people felt heard, they began to heal. When they felt understood, they found courage. And when they felt valued, they discovered solutions on their own. Elias was not a doctor. He was not a teacher. He was not a leader in title. But slowly, he became a healer, a teacher, and a leader in spirit. One afternoon, a group of young men approached Elias. They were curious. One of them asked directly, "Why don't you ever speak? Why don't you tell people what to do? Isn't silence weakness?" Elias smiled gently. Then he finally broke his silence. And with a calm voice, he said, "Speaking is easy, but listening is rare. When you speak, you repeat what you already know. But when you listen, you learn something new." The young men fell silent. They had never thought of it that way. In a world where everyone was shouting to be heard, Elias had discovered that the real power belonged to those who listened. He explained further, people do not remember the noise, they remember the one who made them feel seen. When you listen, you give a gift greater than advice, you give dignity. That day, the young men walked away transformed. They realized that silence was not weakness. It was strength wrapped in patience. It was wisdom disguised as humility. Elias never sought fame. He never wrote books or gave speeches. But his legacy was written in the lives he touched. He proved a timeless truth, that the deepest connections are not built by talking, but by listening. So I ask you now, when was the last time you truly listened? Not waiting for your turn to speak, not preparing your reply, but really listening to understand. Imagine the difference you could make, in your family, in your friendships, in your work, in the world, if you chose to listen more than you spoke. Because in the end, people may forget your words. They may forget your advice. But they will never forget how you made them feel heard. So be like Elias. Be the one who listens. Be the one who gives others the gift of being understood. Silence is not empty. It is full of answers. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of listening. And remember, true wisdom begins not with speaking, but with listening.